I'm super excited about our guest. She's no new face to the AM Club, the beautiful and only. And in fact, before I introduce her, we are talking about branding for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, businesses, whichever
businesses
way. Do you consider yourself as a business owner, an entrepreneur, or a brand? What are you? What shall we?
Maybe
we want to use as a
maybe
case study.
our resource person will help me understand what I am.
Because he's been on and on about his socks this morning.
That was the first thing I noticed.
You look that beautiful. That's the idea.
That was the first thing I noticed.
That is the idea, gentlemen. So Petra is here. Petra Asamoah is our guest this morning. So the guys were laughing at me that because I'm an Ewe man, I'm wearing an Ewe socks. I said, ladies and gentlemen, it's not just an Ewe socks. This is, please zoom it. It's Calvin Klein. Look at that. It's a Calvin Klein sock. So
what does it do to you? What does it add to you now?
Please. So since I'm a brand, I have to.
Now
make sure
you're a brand. Petra, it's good to see you.
Wonderful to be back. And congratulations on your anniversary.
Thank
Though
you.
you didn't share the cake with me, I'm happy for you guys. You've done an awesome
We'll
job.
definitely get you one.
Thank
Get you
you.
one. So
one big question that I was what's the difference between branding and advertising?
Okay, so first of all, his socks are really nice,
Thank
and it gives a very good intro to the conversation.
Right.
Because the thing about branding is it makes you stand out. It's the whole efforts that you put into standing out from the crowd. There are 7 billion people in the world, maybe more, a larger number of businesses. Businesses want to be able to be distinct. They want to be able to stand out from all the other businesses. Because last night I did a very interesting search. So I just Googled Ghanaian restaurants in Accra.
Okay.
And Google gave me almost 1 million results. Like, it said 999,000.
Wow.
Yes, unique results. If I want to choose a restaurant, I need to be able to decide out of all of these which I would choose. Now, there were some, of course, there was one particular restaurant that kept coming up as first. And with my experience of that company, I have a certain feeling when I see the name. That's the brand. Okay. So the emotions, the associations, the feelings that customers or your target market have in association with you is what your brand is. Advertising is what you do to communicate your brand. Okay, so your brand is the things that are represented in your logo, your name, your tagline, the emotions that are associated with things like that, the colors that you use, that's your brand. And advertising is what you do to communicate those
All these things.
Yes.
Okay. What about packaging?
Packaging is, so the cover, okay. And yes, I know sometimes we use packaging in as a synonym to branding, especially in everyday language. So we say, like what Godwin has done today, he has packaged himself. But in actual terms, the packaging is the cover. So it's what you use to, one, attract your audience. It's also what you use to protect your brand. That's one of the things. So you can be a very good product, but you need to have something that attracts. That's the cover, the box, the what you put your product or your service in. Okay. Right. Technically, also the packaging gives some protection. So, for instance, if you have a name for your brand, that name comes on the packaging. And it's one of the ways to also set you apart on the shelf. So when customers look at options, they look at packaging, and that's what they see on the outside. And sometimes they choose because of that.
Okay.
Okay, going back to your definition of branding and being a brand, and I'm looking at the example you cited with over 900 restaurants in Ghana, and I'm thinking, if I'm one of these restaurants, my God, they say there's nothing new under the sun. What exactly am I going to do to stand out from this 900 content? What all will I do? Is it
and
colors?
I'm sure there are much more than that. These are just what Google is giving us as results. Okay. So what are you going to do to stand out? And that's where we say, what do you have on offer? I know when we're talking, the last conversation we had, we kept talking about what exactly is your solution. That has to be very clear. It has to be clear to you, the business owner. It has to be clear in how you communicate it to the market. What are you offering that is different? And then you ask the question. So everybody's offering maybe fufu, everybody's doing banku, but what exactly is it? So think about what is there going to be in the experience that will set you apart. Remember we spoke about, one, how do the employees engage with customers? What is the feeling that you want customers to walk away with? Those are important things. And then when we talk about branding, we also want you to have some distinct features. So your name is distinct. That's one very important thing. You can't have a name that 1,000 other people have. And when they Google that name, they get 1,000 results. You need to have a name that is distinct. And choosing a name for a business or a product is a very important part of it. Sometimes you can choose a name and it means something else somewhere else. It can actually mean something derogatory. So you need to test the name.
Okay. Petra, because we have a lot of time, so I want us to be very practical and see what we can take from this conversation. So let's start off with the name, and then maybe we'll come to the logo. Now we were talking about a name. What goes into selecting a name for a brand? Like a company like this will call their product Apple. Why on earth, of all the things, all the names they can choose, why did they choose an apple?
So let me try and put my mind into, put myself into the minds of Steve Jobs and his friends. I think one of the things they would have thought about would be how unique would it be?
Okay.
How would it stand out in the category of competitors? So if everybody was calling their products XYZ computer, nobody at the time Apple was coming in had a fruits as a name. So that immediately sets you apart. And then it gives you some form of, it's an innovative name. So you want something that people ask, what's that? They become curious about it. They want to know more about it. You don't just say computer or laptop. So choosing a name is important because one, it gives you a distinct identity. It helps you create recognition. It helps you grow awareness. So you don't also want a name that is too difficult to remember.
Right.
Or too difficult to pronounce. So every time people see the name, they're like, how is it? How do you pronounce it? How do I spell it? All of those things can be a hindrance to your brand. So choosing a name is important.
It's very, very important. How important is a logo too?
Very key also. So your logo is a representation of what you want your brand to represent. And essentially your logo tells a certain story. Now, not every company may start out with an interesting logo, and logos evolve. So a logo can evolve over the timeline and the journey of a company, and we know so many examples of that. So as the company evolves, the logo changes, but it doesn't change drastically. We can think about social media logos. So social media companies, Facebook has evolved with their logo, Instagram evolved. So those things are accepted and they're allowed. So as the brand grows, as the company evolves, you can change your logo. But essentially, the logo should represent visually what you want to communicate. So if you're a shoe brand, you don't want to create a logo that, for instance, presents maybe fruits. Or if you're a shoe brand and you want to come across with a personality of being a lifestyle brand that is refreshing, that is energetic, that is healthy and represents wellness, then yes, maybe you want to present yourself as a fruit.
That's where the interesting thing comes in, because then you can't explain to everybody why that is your logo. For instance, you're looking at a tech company that calls itself Apple. Apple is a fruit, so you're wondering, what has the fruit got to do with tech? So that's where you have to explain to everybody, well, because our brand is fresh, it's healthy, I don't know what to say, then you can now bring in all those things. Now, which one should you put more emphasis in, your name, the name of the company, or the logo? Because I know people who spend a lot of time finding the best logo for their brand, but the name is not so exciting.
So the thing about marketing is that so many things have to work well together for you to have a successful marketing strategy. So you can't choose one and say, okay, I'm going to invest a lot of time and effort and money into choosing a name and I'm going to neglect the logo. You need to do all of those other things as well to make it successful. So yes, by all means, take time, effort, money, and yes, it does cost money sometimes. If you're going to use an agency to research the name, to test the name in the market, to test the name and make sure that it doesn't have any negative connotations or derogatory associations anywhere else. Because, for instance, an interesting example is Shito. Shito is very loved in Ghana, but without the O, you see. So
I didn't see
if you're
coming.
moving into another market, you need to be clear what that means and the association it means it has. Okay. So those are some of the things. And it does mean that business owners need to be very intentional They need to plan, and it doesn't mean that you have to go and get a huge budget of 100,000 CDs. You can do things in a very calculated but research-based method. So instead of thinking that I'm just going to dream and I'm going to get inspiration, I'm going to get a name, you need to test that name. One of the simple ways of testing the name is just put it in Google. Try. So Google.
Okay.
Right. One more. Please hold that thought. So logo, name, and one other interesting thing I realize is color.
Yes.
Shall we stay with the logo for a minute?
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay. So I've seen that some people, like your glasses, Bob Gary here. So there's a representation of the logo in the name. Some people also separate the name and then they have a symbol that, and so each time they want to send a message across, in Nike is easiest. Sometimes they don't add the name. You can just see that over there. So which one for a small business, which one is easy? Because sometimes your name is a mouthful plus a symbol that's representing it. And then when you're lifting it, because people cannot identify with your symbol, you have to add the name. In the past, what were they doing that has worked? Lifting it together. And now, which one is easy to do?
It really depends on where you are as a business. Okay, so for an entry-level company, an entry-level product, you need to be, first of all, be very, very clear about building awareness and building recognition for your brand. So awareness essentially means, do people know about you? And then can they recognize your products when exposed to it amongst other products? So you don't want a situation where there are 10 other options and they're not sure if this is brand A or brand B. They want it has to be distinct. For Nike, even though they now use just the swoosh, there was a time they used the Nike and the swoosh. So that tells you the journey of the brand. There will be a time where, for a startup, you would be so recognized and your market will be so aware of you that you no longer need to associate the name with the logo.
Right.
Once they see the logo, they would know that that's you. So it's a journey. Branding is a journey. It's not a destination. So you just say, okay, and that's the thing. You hear people saying we're rebranding, and the rebranding is today. The rebranding can happen in one day. It's a process. Okay. So you start it. You can say you are launching a rebranding effort, a rebranding campaign, but it's going to take a journey, because as you go along that pathway, you want to be able to communicate certain outcomes, and you would only be able to test and decide if you've arrived at those outcomes over a period of time.
Okay.
That's the thing about small businesses and small budgets, because you're thinking, oh, I don't have too much money, I want to do it now. Think about the brand as a long-term journey. And again, marketing should be viewed as a long-term commitment. It can't be something that you just do off the cuff one time and you forget about it. You need to be consistent. So if you want to build a successful brand, think about it as an investment into your business.
Right.
And the thing about brands is that brands have equity. There's this interesting line I picked from a song, Sarkodie's song, Rollies and Cigars, on the No Pressure album. He says, my voice be equity. My PD go fit take loan. People, they pay for the ebumu di ringtone.
That's right.
Now, that's equity. And I found that such a good example of equity, because equity is the commercial value of your brand. MFI, you can set up a business, and in 5 years, you can sell the business.
Right.
And when you're selling the business, you're not just selling the name. You're selling all of the things that you've built into that business to make it profitable. The customers, your network, the name, the associations, all of those things. And that's why we hear in the tech space, for instance, people are selling their businesses for hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
It's equity. Okay, so what's the commercial value of your brand? You need to think about that. And a few days ago, I was listening to a lady called Ethel Kofi, who was actually saying that in setting up a business, your business model could actually be that in the next 5 to 10 years, you want to sell it. So you're building all of the equity and everything in it at the beginning and along the line, because in 5 years, you want to sell this business for $10 million.
Right.
Okay, so we need to think about brands as the effort towards building equity, not just as the color, the logo, the name. It's commercial. It has commercial value.
Good. I'd like you to stay on that, the commercial value and then the brand equity. Let's talk about people who have already established a certain level of brand identity for themselves. They don't want to venture into businesses. And for some reason, they want to, give the commercial value that they have for their person to the business that they own. I've seen the likes of Sarkodie. I mean,
Trying
yes,
it
that's
out
the
with his brand.
but he started a clothing line
Yes.
and said Sa
Yes.
Clothing.
Yes.
Would it be that if he had used the it will work or not? Godwin here is an actor and thinks that he wants to start a business and wants to name it Godwin Salam Nambo. What are the pros and cons in wanting to take advantage of your existing commercial value, not knowing whether you want to be commercially available for the rest of your life?
That's the very important part, whether you're commercially available.
Right.
I think that there's a lot of value that executive influence, and executive here I mean the owner. Nice socks.
Red
for instance.
socks.
Yes.
That's a good one.
Godwin will have to create that identity of being someone who wears
Yes.
happy socks. He has to be known for that, and then he'll use that to promote what he's selling. Okay, because so people who want to be like him will want to wear what he's wearing.
What if he outgrows wearing colorful socks?
Then
How does he
needs
sustain
to
them?
he needs to evolve the business. He can't just say, okay, I'm tired of it and I want to leave, which is sometimes what happens to entrepreneurs. So some entrepreneurial people are very inclined to start, but they're not inclined to stay on things. So I'm sure you all know friends who are entrepreneurs who every year they're doing a new business. That's the thing about entrepreneurs sometimes. They're starters. They have the energy, they have the vision, they have the passion to start things, but may not necessarily have the passion to manage, grow, and to be consistent at it. And that's where the entrepreneur might have to involve business managers. So
Okay.
somebody who actually knows the books of things. Let's think about Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg is the brain behind Facebook. We all know Mark Zuckerberg, but there's a very powerful individual behind Facebook that has actually been the brain behind the organization. Sheryl Sandberg. Sheryl has been the one who has, the COO, who has actually run the organization from where it was as just a startup, Mark Zuckerberg's idea, to a profitable organization that it is now. And she's not the face. I know most people might not even know about her,
Yeah.
but she's the business manager. So she's behind the scenes and she's doing a lot of the actual detailed work. So they're the techies and all of that, but you need people who can manage a business. And that's another conversation that entrepreneurs might want to consider. But if you're not available at some point, then evolve and find a way to not let your personal brand kill the business brand, but you can sort of step away gradually. So a good example, I think locally would be, I think Databank. So Databank for a very long time, we identified with Kelly Gajekpo and Kenyo Ferrata. And at some point they stepped away. But it didn't affect the brand because they had built a succession. They had built a process where it's no longer just them, but it's now the business.
Okay. So Godwin
Another-
here,
okay.
by the time you're, say, 45, 50, and you don't feel like wearing these colorful socks and all of that, and yet you're into that business, this would mean that he has to hire a manager who understands the language of wearing red socks, or he needs to hire a manager who can now, because he's still a brand, and that, except he will not be wearing red socks, he probably would go into a more ethnic color because he thinks his age, his brand has
Or
evolved.
he can get a brand ambassador.
Okay.
That it
Who
doesn't have to
carries
be
on
him.
with it.
Yes. That can carry on that representation and that narration. That's another way of going about it. Another thing that he may also want to consider is from the start, knowing that this is not something I can stick to forever, do a parallel system where it's not just you, but it's you and other people. Okay, so whilst you're building it as you, the representation of it, there are other people that you gradually introduce into your target market. So they get used to those faces, they get used to those names, and it's not just you any longer.
Got you.
Right.
Okay.
Now the color question.
I like that I'm topic for discussion. 2 questions, and I think before that, an example I can cite with what we just talked about would be John DeMello when he started his Mello. I don't know if you remember. He had J Mello, outfits, and then because some controversies and things started surrounding him, it sort of affected his brand, so he couldn't sustain it. So there's the good side, there's the bad side. Okay. 2 questions. I'm taking us back to the whole logo name thing again. And I want to ask if, when it comes to branding, do you think that entrepreneurs, individuals should explore, or there's a cut-out method that you should follow? So for instance, you were talking about Nike using the swoosh and then the name at the same time. But as far as I can remember, Apple has never used Apple. They've never written Apple on any of their devices. It's just been the logo, and I don't know how they did it for it to stick in the minds of people. But as soon as you see it, you know that that's the brand. So, do you think that perhaps individuals should explore every means, even with the names, like even though you're saying that a longer name will be difficult for people to pronounce, but there are Russian brands that have a Russian name, and for some reason it stayed with the world, and people still know it. So, should it be cut out? This is how it should go, or people should try and explore different avenues?
Context is always important in marketing. There's no one size fits all. There should always be what works best. So if a business, an individual wants to start a business, they should really think about, one, what their context is, how that context can be scaled, and how it will impact on what they want to achieve. So the name, you're talking about Russian names.
Or let's say Dolce & Gabbana.
Okay.
That's a long name.
Yes. So the issue is not that the name is long. The issue is that how do you ensure that in your target audience, in the space of your target audience, is recognizable, there's awareness, there's affinity, there's recall. Okay, so Dolce & Gabbana, from what I know, the two names of the partners that form the brand. Okay, so really there's no option with that. If for any reason they decided they're going to split up and they want to have separate brands, they might just be Dolce and they might just be Gabbana at some point. So it's really what works best. And I don't subscribe to the thinking that says if you use like an indigenous name, it means you can't scale globally. That's not necessarily correct. We know very indigenous African names that have gone global because essentially what goes into the brand is beyond the name but the essence. If you're doing something that your target audience likes, brings value to them, they will learn the name.
Petra, I've heard so many times that when you use a local name for your brand, people don't seem to be interested in it. So I have a good friend who does the Happy Socks, Charlie Socks, and we've had a conversation before. It's almost like when they hear it's a Ghanaian brand, oh, wait, it's a Ghanaian brand, and yeah. But the same Ghanaian brand, when you hear, for instance, Pizza Man, what's the name? Pizza Man,
Chicken Man.
Oh, they're not sure where it's from. Or Dough Man, they don't know where it's from. They Yenkoto. But once friend Ayeyi donuts, no, then
Oh, but think about what's the other one? Edinkwa Pie. Edinkwa Pie has also built
it's for
a very
street.
Yes, that's the target market.
Okay.
But would you say that
you're talking about international, though? You're talking about brands that cross.
Okay.
So Edinkwa definitely I can understand because
so
the
what
locals
I'm trying to say is we shouldn't necessarily say that because the name is local, it can't be effective for the target audience. The target audience is key.
Okay.
So who are you trying to appeal to? Build your brand in relation to that.
I'm targeting elites. I still can't use a local name.
You can. It depends on which type of elite and how you're going to communicate that. So Charlie Socks needs to decide how he's going to consistently communicate the value and the essence of what he's trying to offer. And yes, there's some association, and we said branding is also the feelings that may be associated with Ghanaian brands, but that's where you need to decide. Do I want to work towards ensuring that the associations that I build are positive? Do I want to be that brand that people say, oh, this is a Ghanaian brand, but this is a good brand? Versus just running away and saying, like, my maiden name is very English. And I've had someone say to me, I think to be able to sell your books, you may want to just use that name instead of using Asamoah. But I've already built a lot of equity into Petra Asamoah. I don't want to have to go back and think about starting all over again. Okay, and I also don't subscribe to the thinking that it has to sound English and foreign for it to give you a particular type of effect. Because I've created for myself also a type of identity. And I feel that my name associates with that identity. So that's the thing. Branding is not an easy task. It's not something that an entrepreneur can just say that, oh, in 2 days or in 2 weeks, I've cracked it. Yes.
I have personally struggled with whether using Selim or using Godwin as, my main brand name. So I understand totally what you're saying. My second question has to do with research, because you did say that before you go into branding, you have to do a lot of research. Do you think that Ghanaian brands do research?
They do. They do.
Especially small businesses.
So research can be anything from putting a group of 10 people together into a focus group. Focus group is the technical term, but you can put 10 people in a room and run questions. The thing is, for it to be scientific, there's a formula to do it. So if I put 10 of my friends in a room and I say, I want to name a company, Petra Asamoah Consulting Limited, and those 10 friends are like my buddies, like, oh, yes, go ahead and do it. But do I want to be objective in that discussion? Then maybe I shouldn't be having the conversation with them. I should get somebody who can be objective to be in the room and run them through a particular set of questions. So there are various frameworks for having focus group sessions that entrepreneurs can access online. They don't have to do it themselves. They can get assistance. They can create very simple tools. I mentioned the last time, a very simple way of running research could be to create a Google Doc and just share the link on WhatsApp. Ask your friends to answer simple questions. What would you like to pay for a particular type of product between X amount to Z amount? But what you need to do is to make it scientific, go through. So the scientific method essentially means that you have a procedure. It's not haphazard. It's replicable. We can do it again to get particular results. So one key thing you may want to do in a research is put your customers or groups of people into buckets of demographics. Age, gender, maybe location, what they do, their occupation. Are they students? Are they workers? Even the number of years they've worked. Age can be a very interesting determinant of what people buy. Their income level. So I know in Ghana, if you ask somebody their salary, they're not telling you.
Why is that though?
Well, it's just how we are. So put the figures in a range. Okay, even at interviews, when you ask people how much you want to be paid, they start scratching their head and may I have a figure ready. So put it in buckets. Say maybe you earn between 1,000 cedis and 5,000 cedis, because you want to be able to establish what their disposable income is. If someone earns between 1,000 cedis and 5,000 cedis, would they be able to afford what I'm offering? Okay. If it's below 500 cedis, their decision making might be different from someone who earns 5,000 cedis. Okay. So if you're selling a dress, this beautiful dress, MFR, and it's X amount, and you're trying to figure out, would my target group be able to afford it? You may not want to send this research link to a group of students who may not be able to afford it, because obviously they'll say things like, I want to buy a dress for 100 cedis. Or I want to buy a dress for 150 cedis, but that's not your target. So figure out how you're going to be able to reach your target. So research has to be scientific. It can also be done on a very low budget if you know what you're doing. But the thing is, you have to research. You can't just rely on yourself. And I hear entrepreneurs saying, I had a feeling, I had a hunch, I was inspired. Business goes beyond just your feelings and your hunches, because at the end of the day, you want to make money. You really want this business to survive. You want it to sustain itself.
Okay. You were on, okay? So you were on the vehicles to branding. You started with the name, you started with the logo, and then you're moving on to color.
You mentioned colors. Yes.
Okay. But before we move on to color and even anything that's after, so Godwin here has been struggling whether or not to use Salom or Godwin. Okay. If he decides, what shall the transition be like? Because you've always said that branding is not an overnight. It's not like a day thing. It's a process. So what would it look like? How would I know that, wow, he's about changing his brand? What does it look like?
He's about changing is the key thing. You need to have a transition. So, and when you say transition, it means that you don't just go and hit it and one Monday morning, you realize that all your social media handles have been changed. There has to be some strategy to it. So for you, if that's something you're considering, first of all, I'll ask you why. What do you want to achieve? Is it that you're trying to get into Hollywood, and in Hollywood, Salom will stand out more distinctively than Godwin? Yes. So that why should be significant enough and powerful enough to make you want to do the work that is involved in this. So yes, you've identified your why. That's your objective. The other thing, if you go into Nigeria, of course, Salom also stands out better than Godwin. But you want to consider, how much equity have I already built into Godwin? And do I stand to lose based on that? If I transition from Godwin to Salom, will I lose out of the equity I've already built into the name? If you feel that it's not significant enough compared to what you seek to gain, then I'll say go ahead and do it. But one of the things you could do is you can begin to transition by starting to use Salom. Okay, so you begin to, so for new movie deals that you get, you begin to show your name as Selom, you begin to introduce yourself as Selom, and then gradually you phase out Godwin. So you can do a plan over a year, a plan over 2 years, and then and the thing is, the key thing is the why. What do you want to do? Because in every activity in marketing, there's always going to be the difficulties that you encounter. So you walk into a place and people will say, you introduce yourself, maybe over the phone, oh, I'm Selom, and like, we don't know you. So that's where you also have to work towards creating the awareness and the associations. So are they going to associate the name Selom with a particular look? Are they going to associate the name Selom with a particular voice? Because branding just goes beyond just the logo and all of that to even audio associations. You might know that radio stations, for instance, have particular audio sounds that they use, and immediately you
just
hear
did
that.
one advert voice. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and the example that we use is Sarkodie's
Yes.
That's an audio association. That's part of his brand.
Beam.
Is part of the brand. There's what does Samini use?
Samini, boo.
Boo,
They used
yeah.
to do that.
You know, so
Achisa.
all of those things.
He's transitioned, and
He's been trying to transition from Boyaka to Achisa, but I don't know if it's working or not. Because I think in the last 10 years, he
will take
changed
a while.
from
It will take a
Batman
while.
to
But
Samini.
one of the most successful rebranding efforts I've noticed in Ghana has been the bandana to Shatawale.
Yeah.
That for me
Yeah.
has been very
Well
successful.
done.
And
Do
when I was
you
doing my
think that
MPhil,
do you think that he went through the process, or his
It was a
target
fluke?
market? Yeah.
No, I don't think it was a fluke. When I was studying for my MPhil, one of my group sessions actually, we discussed that brand. I don't think it was a fluke. I think, and that's the thing. It looks like it was easy, but I think it was very intentional and very calculated, because the bandana brand appealed to represented a certain type of feeling, certain type of persona, which Shatawale may have pulled some of that essence from, but has also achieved something different. And the
Okay.
people behind the brand are not, the people who worked on that brand, they know what they were doing. And I feel it was on a very successful
Is
one.
the import of what you're saying to say that if you're rebranding, something about you is also changing?
In
This
some
man is an
instances,
actor.
yes.
Does it mean that because he still wants to be an actor and yet he just wants to change the brand?
Yes, but brands evolve. People grow. And I saw a very interesting inscription. Instead of thinking of ourselves as aging, we should think of ourselves as growing, like trees. We don't say a tree is old. We say a tree is growing.
Okay.
You know, so brands evolve as well. Little Bow Wow
Yeah. So
is no longer Little Bow Wow.
Yeah,
Because he's
he's
now
grown.
a full-grown man.
grown,
Okay,
yeah.
so you evolve like that. You can Puff Daddy, P. Diddy,
P.
Diddy, all of those different
Okay.
names. It's fine. As long as you're able to communicate the why to your audience, you're able to be consistent with it, and then they catch on to it, it's fine.
Snoop Dogg to Snoop Lion. It didn't work.
No.
Snoop Dogg's didn't work.
Because he
People
remained a dog, or
Yes,
what?
you
Yeah.
know. I don't know why, but he wanted to be Snoop Lion and it didn't work. The Shatawale brand, I'm curious to know. So I'm comparing Shatta to Samini in this case. Now, Samini transitioned from Batman to Samini whilst he was still in
Yes,
the industry.
yes.
Shatta disappeared.
Yes.
He went away and comes back and says, I'm Shatawale. Do you think that perhaps also helped in making that transition successful?
Maybe, but that's again, context matters. So Samini's journey would be different from what Shatawale's journey would be, and the reasons why they did it those different ways also could be. I won't have the full information on why.
Coming in,
Absolutely.
talking in context
Absolutely.
of. So, if the question is bread and butter, and you have commercial identity, okay, and people love it. I'm struggling with Mamaga. And yet it's been 10 years. And I'm trying to tell them that I'm no longer a beauty queen. I think that time is over. I just want to be MFA Kosiadeti. But 100 times, oh, Mamaga.
I hear it all the time.
Mamaga. Then I'm thinking, well, it's some equity I want. If Mamaga is giving me that equity, what's the point? But I still feel and wake up like I have outgrown Mamaga. How do you get that commercial? I don't know, maybe.
So maybe it's not that you've outgrown it, you've just evolved from it.
Okay.
So the Mamaga name and identity represented something for you.
Right.
That love that people have, and that's the thing about brands, you're trying to achieve affinity, you're trying to achieve love. So when people see the brand, they have positive emotions towards it. if that still brings you value, then you need to determine very, very reflectively what you want to do with it. And how you want to carry it on. Maybe there should still be some mamaga aspect to your brand, where you still engage in community engagement, you're still doing things that are cultural and traditionally relevant, you still want to represent the indigenous Ewe woman. You need to decide that. So, but I would say that because there's equity in it, don't just dump it just yet. But build what you want to be. So be consistent with what you want to be, consistently building. And maybe you also want to begin to gradually, like we're saying for Godwin, if Mamaga is in your IG handle, right? So if that's not what you want to be known for, begin to change. Okay.
Yeah.
But it will take time.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have some questions?
Yes, so my name is Bashira from Sierra Leone. I'm a fashion designer. Thank you so much again for the business guide on branding. I'm enjoying watching it and learning. So the person took a picture of you and sent all the way from Sierra Leone. Thank you so much, sister. I'm really enjoying lifestyle segment today on the AM Club this morning. Thank you so much. Well, Godwin.
That's it. So 2 more before you go. We have some few minutes to go. We didn't do the colors.
Yeah.
I think it's important. I wonder why. So how is it that a brand like, unfortunately, I have to mention the brands because, you know, but for the sake of this conversation, a brand like MTN will use yellow. When you see yellow, you know this is MTN. At the same time, Cowbank is using yellow, very yellow. Another brand is using yellow. All these people are using yellow, and yet it's so successful. How again do you stand out among the many brands, competitors out there using a color that others have used, and how do you stand out with these colors, and what role does color play again to the brand?
So in starting out on your brand strategy, one of the key things you need to determine is what the personality of the brand would be. And the personality essentially is think of the brand as a person, as a human being, and give it character. So that's what would determine the colors that you choose. So what character will I want my brand to be? Is it warm and friendly? What colors represent warm and friendly? If I want my brand to represent innovation and life and wellness, what colors represent that? Now, the MTN example, one of the key things about that is in the category, MTN stands out. If you think about telecommunication companies, there's no other yellow.
Okay, category.
Okay, so that's very important. In your category, you need to think about how I'm going to stand out. In this, in the midst of your competitors, how am I going to stand out? If you're going to just use, and that's where the yellow for Cowbank also stands out. Is there any other bank that uses yellow?
UMB, but I think
UMB,
is yellow and
their
black.
yellow is a bit different.
Okay.
Different, yeah,
Yes,
with
a
some
different
black
shade
in there.
of yellow.
Okay.
So that's the thing. And that's where marketers also need to be very intentional about how they present the personality of the brand. The font style you even use creates an identity for you. So it's not just any MX24, it's not just any M, any X, any 24. It's a particular font. So that type of consistency needs to be communicated throughout the company, and the people who represent the brand must use the right brand representation. So these elements are to project the personality of the brand, and they just must be consistent.
And lastly, this is for me, but this is free consultation. So I noticed that when it comes to artists, they use, like you're saying, style and font for their name. So Stonebwoy has a very unique way of writing Stonebwoy. Shatta has a unique way of writing Shatta Wale. But when it comes to actors, do you think actors should have something like that for themselves? I've not seen any Hollywood star who is using. Maybe Brad Pitt has a way of writing Brad Pitt, or Denzel has a way of writing Denzel. They just use their names. Whoever is creating the movie uses the font style.
Maybe because with acting, it's more visual in terms of the person. So we're not so concerned about how you sign your name for an actor. We are more concerned about how you look.
Okay.
So how we see you, how you act, all of those things. And that's what the target market is concerned about.
Okay.
For an author who is signing books, the signature is important. For an artist, the signature is important. So how they write their name is important. I haven't really studied into why actors have that peculiar representation where they don't really, I'm not really concerned about how their names come across. But I also know that the name, not how it's written, but what name they choose is more important for them. Yeah. So some people don't use their their real names or their government names. They have pseudonyms that they use. They have pen names that they use because they feel that those names would sell better than their actual names.
What's the budget I need to come to your consultancy?
It's
For small business.
It's client specific and need specific.
That's her brand. Did you see that?
So the thing is, there are companies that have the wherewithal to afford the time and the effort that needs to be invested into actually doing these things well. And then there are small businesses. So if a small business comes to me and says, Petra, I really, really need help to start, I'm confused, I would look at them with their needs and try and support them.
Okay.
Petra Asamoah, marketing strategist, sales, author, amazing person.
She's the only one that comes
Thank
and makes
you.
me feel like I'm in class. I'm taking a lecture.
And you're a wonderful host. So it's always easy to be here.
Learning a lot.
Thank you.
Angela, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Emma, for taking time.
All right, guys. So we're turning just quickly. We'll be back with Fashion Wednesday. We're talking about bridal hairstyling. I've been asking the question: what would a bride do? Choose a hair that she likes, or choose a hair that will mesmerize, the husband to be. Please stay.